Bro, tell me why I did not read the rest of this chapter. I got so excited about the first sentence and was thinking about reading the chapter just before it, the one I just finished when I was reading the first sentence. Then then everything about consciousness made sense for a moment to me. Made a video about it. Had to use the toilet again. So picked up where I was reading in The Wizard of I and realized I should have kept reading. Okay, so this is, if you will, a follow-up from my consciousness video. And we'll say that I think the consciousness video might have bonus content. It's from today, so same date, 2023, Hober 5 Fox D. Okay, so The Wizard of I, Gerald Smallberg, practicing neurologist, playwright, off-Broadway productions, charter members, The Golden Ring. Consciousness is the fusion of immediate stimuli with memory that combine. Consciousness is the fusion of immediate stimuli with memory that combines the simultaneous feeling of being both the observer and the observed into a smooth, enveloping flow of time that is neither truly the past nor the present, but somehow inexplicably each of them. It is the ultimate authority and arbiter of our perceptual reality. That consciousness is still... It is the ultimate authority and arbiter of our perceptual reality. That consciousness is still an intractable problem for scientists and philosophers to understand is not surprising. That's why I stopped. This is exactly the moment where I stopped, because I was like, oh, okay, he don't get it. And if you watch my consciousness video, watch exactly the next line and the last line of this first paragraph. Whatever the final answer turns out to be, I suspect it will be an illusion the mind evolved to hide the messy workings of its parallel modular computing. So I had written, consciousness is an illusion, and then was ready to move on. Now, I have not read the rest of this, so I'm very excited about what he's going to say. Neurophysiologists are finding, as they pull ever so slightly at the veil that shrouds the Wizard of I, that this indispensable, attentive, and observant self-monitor called consciousness is dependent on a trick in overseeing our perceptions. Our subjective sense of time does not correspond to reality. Cortical evoked potentials, electrical recordings, of the normal human brain during routine activity have been shown to precede by almost a third of a second the awareness of an actual willed movement or response to sensory stimulation. Yeah, it's 250 milliseconds. The cortical evoked potentials indicate that the brain is initiating or reacting to what is happening far sooner than the instantaneous perception we experience. On a physiological scale, this represents a huge discrepancy that our mind corrects by falsifying the actual time an action or event occurs, thus enabling our conscious experience to conform to what we perceive. If I were watching, I'd rewind that, but I'm just going to continue reading, and then I'll probably just read it again on my own. Wait, no. On a physiological scale, the cortical evoked potentials indicate that the brain is initiating or reacting to what is happening far sooner than the instantaneous perception we experience. So we're like, okay, I just made a decision, but actually far before that, other parts of the brain were already initiating the thing and reacting to it. So on a physiological scale, so physically speaking, this represents a huge discrepancy. Right. So then our brain, there's a discrepancy because our brain is like right now, but other parts of the brain, it had actually already happened 250 milliseconds earlier. Or more, 280 maybe, I don't know. because it says almost a third. And then our mind corrects this like discrepancy between experiencing it now and the reality of it happening, and then the activity that preceded it, by falsifying the actual time that the action occurred. So we say, oh, that 250 milliseconds ago action of that decision, that's actually now in this moment that I'm aware of it. Thus enabling our conscious experience to conform to what we perceive. Okay. But data even more damaging to our confidence in the reliability of our perceptions comes from studies of rapid eye movements called saccades, that are triggered by novel visual stimuli. So you see there's a new thing all of a sudden in your visual field, and they've got a thing that's watching where your retina goes, and so when there's a new thing, automatically it's processed in the periphery as existing, and that triggers your eye to, not your head, but your eye to quickly look at it, to get it into the center of vision so we can get more information about it. There you go. Okay. During the brief moments of these, well, I can't really show you because it probably wouldn't be as brief if I showed you, right? But it's much more like that, during the brief moments of our jerky eye movements, visual input to the brain is actively suppressed. We are literally blind. Without this involuntary ocular censorship, we would be repeatedly plagued with moments of acute blurred vision that would be unpleasant as well as unsafe. Since we're looking around, the image is blurred. Yeah, and I think I felt nauseous as I almost tried to not censor. I don't know whether that's possible, but so there's this automatic, this involuntary ocular censorship where the eye is sort of censoring. Right. Visual input to the brain is actively suppressed. Okay, so your eye is going to go like this to check out this new thing, and this is all like this. Your eye wants to go like this to check out this new thing. The visual information that's taking in as it does this quick movement is suppressed so that it doesn't even get sent for processing. Because otherwise, you'd have a whole lot of blurry images sent for processing. Oh yeah, can you imagine that experience? If you could, every time your eye moved, if you could see, if you were actually able to perceive and interpret the visual information between the eye's original position and its position at t+1. And especially because we tend to just glance, right? So I wonder what ratio of the visual information is from moving time versus stationary time. And can you imagine if it was half and half? Can you imagine if it took 1 instant, 1 unit of time to move to the thing, you process it for 1 unit of time, and then 1 unit of time to move to another thing? That means that 50% of your visual information would be blurred. And that would be very uncomfortable and unsafe because, well, you need to know when you're moving, when other things are moving or something. And also, there's just no point in sending blurry information to the rest of the brain and using resources to interpret that. Wow. From a survival calculus, I really should just keep reading. From a survival calculus, this would pose an extreme disadvantage since it would invariably occur with novel stimuli, which by their very nature require not the worst, but the best visual acuity. Right, so every time that you wanted to look at novel stimuli, if you were also receiving the information acquired during your journey to receive that novel stimuli, that would be that there would be a lot of non-clear information, which would contribute to an unclear sum of information, which is why it says that would be the worst, or that wouldn't be the best visual acuity. The wizard's solution, so the Wizard of I, the wizard's solution to this intolerable situation is to exclude those intervals from our stream of awareness and replace them instead with a vision extrapolated from what just occurred to what is immediately anticipated. Right. Okay. So your eye is on this thing. Then as your eye moves, your brain just stays with this information, and it anticipates what this will probably be, which is why often you can think that like you saw a thing, and it's actually like another thing, let's say, but you think that you saw a thing, and honestly, aren't there those moments where like really you saw the thing, and then you look more closely and it's not the thing, and you still you can imagine the thing because it was like, so it'll happen with Neo a lot. I will think that I see him, and then I'll realize it's a bush or it's a whatever, and often this happens at night. But holy shit, he was there. There was an instant where I could see things that clearly, I could see the shape of Neo, the color of Neo, and none of that was actually there. It was just kind of an animal-looking shape, but it doesn't actually look like Neo at all. And then the same thing happens, right, when you see, whether it's like someone maybe you miss or someone who has died. And it's not just like you're seeing people that like look like this person, but in reality, yes, you may be seeing people that look like this person, but also when you first perceive them, if they look enough like the person, your brain, as it's going to get more acute visual information, it's going to fill in the gaps. And you're going to have an image of, oh, that is the person, until you can set your thing on it and the brain switches from the anticipation to the actual information. So there's 3 stages. There's the original information. Then the only thing you're looking at is the anticipation of the new information. Then the only thing you're looking at is the new information. Wow, awesome. Because otherwise you couldn't, it wouldn't work so I was wrong earlier when I was saying that it's just the current information, the original information, and then it blocks out your sort of vision or your awareness of your vision until it gets to the new thing and has new information to process. But no, it doesn't hold on to the original that whole time. It quickly moves to an anticipation, an imagined image of what this thing is. Yeah. All right, great. So let's read that again. The wizard's solution to this intolerable situation is to exclude those intervals from our stream of awareness and replace them instead with a vision extrapolated from what just occurred to what is immediately anticipated. Consciousness, like a former president, has to come up with an accounting for the erased period. It has to confabulate. Evolution provided a much longer epoch to work out the bugs in this necessary deception than the limited time frame under the gun of a special prosecutor. Evolution provided a much longer a much longer period of time, millions of years, right? Okay, so evolution provided a much longer epoch to work out the bugs in this necessary deception than the limited time frame under the gun of a special prosecutor. Because a former president under the gun of a special prosecutor only has a moment to come up with some bullshit story, I guess. Okay. Instead of trying to hide the existence of the tape, consciousness came up with a far cleverer trick of obscuring the deletion. It does this by falsifying the time, backdating those necessary moments so that there is no appearance of any gap. Right, so rather than just deleting... Okay, so it's not filling in maybe the whole eye movement time with what's anticipated. It is, but it doesn't even keep that as that amount of time. So it's almost like, let's say it takes 1 unit of time to move here. And then, and it's just simple editing, right? In like a movie, you have someone like get into the car, and then you see them drive for a second, and then they're at their destination, right? So that image of the character driving, that's the like anticipated clip. That's the clip that's like filled in. But then it's not even filled in for the actual amount of time that it took. So you don't like watch like the whole thing. Instead, we pretend like it actually didn't take that long, and then here's like a little image to, so it doesn't like try to hide the tape of what happened. It replaces it with a shorter event, and then backdates stuff so that the shorter event is the amount of time that. Wow. I don't know, maybe you explained it better, sorry. And so instead of trying to hide the existence of the tape, consciousness came up with a far cleverer trick of obscuring the deletion. It does this by falsifying the time, backdating those necessary moments so there is no appearance of any gap. Now, it can't just backdate like the necessary. Well, you gotta be shitting me, bro. We just spent 20 minutes reading this chapter for the first time together, and I wasn't recording. Alright, so let's see. First thing I had said was that, so this is, we'll say, a follow-up from my consciousness video. I guess you could watch it after the bonus content, or before the consciousness video altogether. I made a consciousness video because I'd read the first few lines of this response to what is your favorite deep, beautiful, and elegant theory of how the world works. One of the many submissions in this book. This one is Gerald Smallberg's The Wizard of I. I had read the first sentence after reading the previous chapter, which I already wanted to share with you. And so I stopped reading because I realized consciousness is an illusion. And so I read everything but the last sentence of the first paragraph. And anyway, so now let's read it. But unfortunately, before we were reading it together for the first time, but okay. So, The Wizard of I, Gerald Smallberg, practicing neurologist, playwright, off-Broadway productions, charter members, The Gold Ring. Consciousness is the fusion of immediate stimuli with memory that combines the simultaneous feeling of being both the observer and the observed into a smooth, enveloping flow of time that is neither truly the past nor the present, but somehow inexplicably each of them. It is the ultimate authority and arbiter of our perceptual reality. I don't like that sentence. That consciousness is still an intractable problem for scientists and philosophers to understand is not surprising. And that's why I stopped reading, because I was like, you actually just figured it out. You just told us what it is. The feeling of being both and blah, blah, blah. There's something else I said in the other video about this feeling of... No, that was in the consciousness video, I think. Okay. Whatever the final answer turns out to be, I suspect it will be an illusion the mind evolved to hide the messy workings of its parallel modular computing. So in my video, that's what I ended up saying, that it's an illusion. And then when I went back to the toilet to continue reading this chapter, I saw that, oh, he also says that. So got very excited about reading what's next. So let's do this again. Neurophysiologists are finding, as they pull ever so slightly at the veil that shrouds the Wizard of I, that this indispensable, attentive, and observant self-monitor called consciousness is dependent on a trick in overseeing our perceptions. Our subjective sense of time does not correspond to reality. Cortical evoked potentials, electrical recordings of the normal human brain during routine activity, have been shown to precede by almost a third of a second the awareness of an actual willed movement or a response to sensory stimulation. I'm going to read this all the way through and then maybe we'll go through it again. The cortical evoked potentials indicate that the brain is initiating or reacting to what is happening far sooner than the instantaneous perception we experience. On a physiological scale, this represents a huge discrepancy that our mind corrects by falsifying the actual time an action or event occurs, thus enabling our conscious experience to conform to what we perceive. Please bear with me, because we're gonna go through that chapter again. We'll just have one more page, just 2 pages, okay? But data even more damaging to our confidence in the reliability of our perceptions come from studies of rapid eye movements called saccades that are triggered by novel visual stimuli. During the brief moments of these jerky eye movements, visual input to the brain is actively suppressed. We are literally blind. Without this involuntary ocular censorship, we would be repeatedly plagued with moments of acute blurred vision that would be unpleasant as well as unsafe. From a survival calculus, this would pose an extreme disadvantage, since it would invariably occur with novel stimuli, which by their very nature require not the worst, but the best visual acuity. The wizard's solution to this intolerable situation is to exclude those intervals from our stream of consciousness and replace them instead with a vision extrapolated from what just occurred to what is immediately anticipated. Consciousness, like a former president, has to come up with an accounting for the erased period. Evolution provided a much longer epoch to work out the bugs in this necessary deception than the limited time frame under the gun of a special prosecutor. Instead of trying to hide the existence of the tape, consciousness came up with a far cleverer trick of obscuring the deletion. It does this by falsifying the time, backdating those necessary moments so that there is no appearance of any gap. This illusion of visual continuity from inference and extrapolation reveals an innate vulnerability in the brain software that any good hacker can exploit. Magicians, card sharks, 3-card Monty hustlers have made a nice living working this perceptual flaw. In a comic routine, I had my Richard Pryor impression. In a comic routine, Richard Pryor expressed this best when caught by his wife with another woman. Who are you gonna believe? Me or your lying eyes? I don't even really know what Richard Pryor sounds like. Okay, so if you didn't understand that, let's just go through that again. I'm gonna read it. And we're going to try to stay on the same page. Speaking of pages, it's 285 and 286 if you have the book. This explains everything. Okay, consciousness is the fusion of immediate stimuli with memory that combines the simultaneous feeling of being both the observer and the observed into a smooth... No, we already read that in the previous video. Okay. All right. So neurophysiologists are finding, as they pull ever so slightly at the veil that shrouds the Wizard of Eye, that this indispensable, attentive, and observant self-monitor called consciousness, so this singular thing that pays attention and that observes our actions and so on, that monitors the self, that this whole thing actually is a trick. It's an illusion, and it's a trick that the brain came up with to deal with a perceptual flaw, to deal with a problem that the brain has when it's interpreting the world. So now let's just move over to that. And then he talks about how cortical evoked potentials, electrical recordings of... It's hard for me to do this twice. Ugh, okay. So many times. Okay. Basically, when people talk about free will, there's a huge experiment that makes us question it. Free will is not real, by the way, but that makes us question it, which is that they had subjects report when they made a decision or when they experienced a thing or whatever, while they were in the brain scan, and we would see the activity of that decision, of the enacting of that, of the beginning of that action, not the action decision, but whatever action has been decided. We see that start to happen up to a third of a second before the reported time that it happened. So I thought it was 250 milliseconds, but this says almost a third. So sometime between 250 and 333. And on a physiological scale, this represents a huge discrepancy that our mind corrects by falsifying the actual time an action or event occurs. The cortical evoked potentials indicate that the brain is initiating or reacting to what is happening far sooner than the instantaneous perception we experience. So we think, okay, there, decision, that happened. I just felt it, and that's when it happened. But that's not true. Your experience of the decision happens well after the decision. So there's a discrepancy there. So what do? Well, we falsify the actual time of the action to enable our conscious experience to conform to our perception. But data even more damaging to our confidence in the reliability of our perceptions come from studies of rapid eye movements. Okay, so basically, you're looking at a thing, and you're in an experiment, your head is held still, and there's a thing that's looking at the exact position of your retina, right? Okay? Now, the way you're programmed is that, and it's obvious why you'd be programmed this way, the way you're programmed is that when there is suddenly new visual stimuli, that could be a bird, that could be a butterfly, it could be a thread, it could be another human being. Anytime there is something in the environment changes in a way that could be important, so we're not just talking about or it could even be a tree swaying more than it usually does. There is a system in the brain to direct our eyes focus to that thing. So there is information perceived in the periphery, comes into the eye, it's sent, and I'm pretty sure it's just going to be the superior colliculus before it's even, it's going to be well before the thalamus and before it's processed by the occipital lobe. The visual information is oh, hey, there's a change perceived by the rods, okay, which are your periphery sensors. There's a change there, so now we need the cones, which is the center of the pupil, the retina, whatever. We need the cones to get more information, color, detail, stuff like that. Okay, so a thing happens, a novel visual stimulus in your visual field, which is interpreted by the lowest parts of your brain as warranting attention. So then your eyes go like this in order to fix upon the thing and get more detailed information about it. Okay? Now, it doesn't happen like this. Okay? No. I can't really even show you because the rapid eye movements, I can't even intentionally do them, right? And I don't even know whether you'd be able to actually see them. The way that the eye, is going like this and focusing on different elements. So there's this weird thing. I'm looking at my phone. Something happens over there. And my cones, let's say, are looking at this part of my visual field. This is where the detail is. And then my cones are then going to be processing that until I land on the object, at which point my cones are processing that thing. And there's another thing where I want to check on something, or when you look at a new scene, your eyes are darting around super fast. That corner, where's the most light, what's important, blah, blah, and it's go boom, 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 okay? So, during the brief moments of these jerky eye movements, visual input to the brain is actively suppressed. Remember I said I'm perceiving what's in here, and then I'm perceiving what's in here? That's kind of a lie. So basically, the cones are being hit by light that is here, and then by light that is here, and then here, and then here, and then here. But it's suppressing, or maybe not the cones, maybe somewhere a little bit deeper in, is suppressing that information going any farther. It's like there is no point in any part of the brain considering the information, the blurry information, as we're moving from one object to another. No point. And it would just give us a headache. Okay? So it's actively suppressed. We are literally blind. So between this moment and, in between those different moments, as I'm sort of looking around, my eyes are landing on things, in between those moments, I am blind. without this involuntary ocular censorship, so without this automatic, this eye's decision to, not send to the brain that information. If we didn't have that, if the eye wasn't saying, oh, no, hey, you know what, you don't even need to know this bit, then we would be repeatedly plagued with moments of acute, right, small angle, so this, I swear to God, if we're recording, we're just going to pick out where we left off. Ugh. All right, so we would be repeatedly plagued. So without this involuntary ocular censorship, we would be repeatedly plagued with moments of acute blurred vision that would be unpleasant as well as unsafe, right? So acute, small angle in your visual field that is being processed being sent by the cones, okay? And as I move, that's obviously going to be blurry. But I don't see that because that information is suppressed. And thank goodness, because otherwise you'd have all this blurry visual data, which could be maybe, I don't know, up to half of the visual data as your eyes are darting around. Can you imagine the brain has to go through a whole bunch of images, and half of them are like blurry, and it's analyzing all these? Doesn't make any sense. It wouldn't make any sense. From a survival calculus, this would pose an extreme disadvantage, since it would invariably occur with novel stimuli, which by their very nature require not the worst, but the best visual activity. So if all of a sudden there's a fucking beast running towards me, right? I don't need the blurry information that my eyes took in as I looked from you to the beast, right? Because then, yeah, okay. Now, so the wizard's solution to this intolerable situation is to exclude those intervals from our stream of awareness and replace them instead with a fake thing, a vision extrapolated from what just occurred. And maybe I heard a noise, so that's going to be part of some information that I'm going to use to create an image, to what is immediately anticipated, right? So if Neo is in this area, and I see an animal all of a sudden running towards me in the corner of my eye or in the periphery, my brain is going to fill in that animal with Neo's face. And then in the previous video, I talked about how often this happens when, the classic thing is, someone died, or you broke up with someone, whatever, and you miss them, so you see them everywhere. And so what happens is you see someone that looks enough like them in the corner of your eye, then as your eye is moving to look over there, you have now an image of the person that you miss there. All that is filled in, and it's not until you're actually you get a second to process the information of the actual face you're looking at, that the image is replaced by the real face, rather than by the anticipated face. And then this happens a lot when I'm with Neo at nighttime, where I think I know where Neo is, but then I look more closely, or he comes from another direction or something. I look more closely at where I thought I could literally see him. I thought it looked brown, it was the shape of a dog, and actually it's not at all the shape of a dog. It's just like a bush, which is about his size, But really, in my mind, there were actually images of him there. And so those images where that was the brain, fuck, shut the fuck up. So, the wizard's solution to this intolerable situation is to exclude those intervals from our stream of consciousness and replace them instead with a vision extrapolated from, so based on, so invented based on some pieces of information, which are what just occurred and what is immediately anticipated. Consciousness, like a former president, has to come up with an accounting for the erased period. Evolution provided a much longer epoch to work out the bugs in this necessary deception than the limited time frame under the gun of a special prosecutor. So a former president, the joke is, he's got a special prosecutor, whatever his name was, the guy with Trump, who's like, how can you explain this period of time? and then they delete the evidence of, whatever happened. Well, Nixon wasn't smart enough to do that, but fuck. But evolution, the millions of years that the brain's been evolving, hey, we get much more time to be able to figure out how to do this besides just erasing the evidence. Dad? Okay. Instead of trying to hide the existence of the tape, consciousness came up with a far cleverer trick of obscuring the deletion so that we don't feel like there's some missing time. I mean, it has to be an emergency, right? Hello? Buddy? Fucking hell. Alright. Alright, let's see what their message is. Hold on. Fuck. It was so good the first time I did it. Oh, that was so good, but I was happy with it. Hi, we can fax you. Are you able to receive a package there? God, fuck. How the fuck do you expel this place? Okay, Piasezzno. Piasech. No. Fucking hell. Oh, fucking hell. I'm just so annoyed right now. Not with them at all. I shouldn't take it out on them. This is such an important chapter. Your consciousness is an illusion. It isn't good for me to explain that. Alright. Instead of trying to hide the... I don't want to fucking edit this. Instead of trying to hide the existence of the tape... Oh, God, this fucking mic. I've probably been knocking it this whole fucking time. Instead of trying to hide the existence of the tape, consciousness came up with a far cleverer trick of obscuring the deletion. It does this by falsifying the time, backdating those necessary moments so that there's no appearance of any gap. Okay, so basically there was X amount of time between me looking at my phone and me processing the information over there. That amount of time is shortened and filled in with what I think is going to be over there. And it's shortened by me having the feeling that it was this and then that, basically. Like a little tiny moment in between that was filled in with the anticipation. The actual length of time between is basically deleted from my experience. It's... Yeah, and you're like, what do you mean? It's like, I don't know. I don't know. Have you never taken a nap, fallen asleep, woken up? I keep trying to accept it, but I guess the internet's not good, so it keeps... Dad, is this an emergency?
Hello?
Is it an emergency, buddy?
Yeah.
Okay, what's up? Send a package to Marta's address.
To who?
To Marta's address. Yeah?
Okay, we need the address because FedEx is like a half a mile from
Yeah. No, I saw that in your text messages. After all of that information is my information that's been delivered. I'm recording a video. You have my location. And the address as well. So it's all typed out. No point in me telling you because it's piece of cheno. I don't know. Anyway, it's typed out. It's in the document or in the conversation. Okay. So we're good then?
You're breaking up a bit. Did you just say you sent us the address?
Yeah.
Okay, you're in the middle of something.
I'm very much in the middle of something, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
right.
bye. Okay, so, alright, yeah, have you ever had a nap? I know one from my childhood. It was the craziest thing for me. I fell asleep like in a closet or something. I remember when I woke up and I thought no time had passed. I had no sense of time having passed. And in fact, like hours had passed. Because everything that happens, every experience you have is a thing in the brain. So like, for instance, you don't have the feeling that time passed because time passed, right? You're not plugged into an actual, like an atomic clock or whatever. It's all an illusion, sort of, your sense of time. Often a sense of time will be based on like how much information has been received, or it'll be on how much effort was put in. So if you have to put in a lot of effort, you're going to feel like it was a long time. Whereas if you're having fun, it's going to feel like it wasn't a long time. Traumatic things people describe like it's really weird. It felt like it took forever. It felt like they were in that moment forever. That's because their brain was taking a bunch of information. There's a whole bunch of activity, right, to respond to the situation. And so for that reason, it feels like an extended period of time. But then at the same time, there are certain elements that are so compelling, so salient, and there's so much and it's just like these compelling instances, but like they must have happened over the course of more time than it feels like. It felt like it was like in an instant, and yet it felt like it was a lifetime. And anyway, so your perception of time is created in the brain, right? And so obviously the brain can go, oh, you know what? I don't want them to feel like, we don't want us to feel like we went like that and there was this concerning gap. We also don't want that gap to be the actual information, which is this blur. So we don't want the blur. We don't want the gap. So hey, they call up the time department. They say, hey, listen, I know it's actually been like a second and a half, but why don't you write this one down as? I know it's been 100 milliseconds. Why don't you write this down though as 40 milliseconds? Okay. This video I feel like I've been making for about 6 days straight. Because it's been difficult to follow what I've been saying, it's probably felt like about 2 hours of viewing to you. And all of my frustrations, all this effort, the interruptions and all that. Well, I feel like I started this yesterday at least. Alright, there you go. Fuck, dude. Can you imagine this? How long was that? Oh, that was already 13 minutes and didn't even get interrupted? Jeez.